Morning. It's good to see you this morning. We have a good crowd out on this good Lord's Day. It's good to be here with you this morning as we study together from the good book. If you are visiting with us here this morning, good. Good. What does that even mean? Most of the time we throw this word good around. And what we were saying is that we like something. It's really an expression of our preference for something. In an objective sense, something is good when it successfully serves the purpose that it was created for. Consider the classic example of a watch. If a watch was created to tell time, and it is right on time every time, even if it's a rather plain Casio, like the one on the screen or like the one I'm wearing, we should be able to agree it's a good watch because it does what it was supposed to do. And it may not be your preference. You might prefer something a bit fancier, or maybe it's just too fancy. Or maybe you like one that has a built-in calculator. But as a timepiece, we should be able to agree that it is good. Likewise, if a watch acts as if there are 25 hours in the day, or 59 seconds in a minute, then regardless of its beauty or appearance, it is a bad watch. A creation is only good if it fulfills the purpose for which it was created for. And it seems to be in this sense that we can understand the 7 days of creation and the use of the word good. God created something, he saw that it went as planned, and he called it good. But what was the plan? What was purpose? In Isaiah chapter 43, verses 6 and 7, I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. Everyone who was called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. We were created for God's glory. That is our purpose. For God's glory. Our purpose is God's glory. Just like a watch was designed to tell the right time every time, we were designed to give God glory. A good person, then, is one who glorifies God. A good life, then, is one that glorifies God and is lived to the glory of God. And the opposite is true. We are bad when we fail to give glory to God. In Romans chapter 3 and verse 23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It's really pretty simple. You are here for God's glory. Except what does that even mean? Challenge here is that glory can be a bit hard to define and to describe. Well, what exactly is God's glory? It's not really a word that we use that often outside of religious settings. How would you even describe it to somebody who has never heard of this word glory? It's similarly difficult as words like beauty. Well, how would you define beauty? I mean, you could try to look at similar words and you could say, well, it's kind of like pretty. Well, okay, well, what's that? Or attractive. Well, you mean like a magnet? It starts getting tricky when you start trying to define these things. What does that even mean? And like that, glory can be a bit hard to nail down. Unlike words that have a clear definition, like square. I mean, a square is a two-dimensional object with four equal sides, and each corner has 90-degree angle. That's pretty easy to define. You can describe that, and someone with no background should be able to identify what is the square you speak of. But glory, how would you define it? More importantly, how does the Bible define it? How does God define it? Because that is our purpose. To make it a bit easier, let's start with a word that probably is a little bit easier to define, and then let's then make a contrast. Holy. But what does holy mean? Holy is the idea of being separate, set apart, in a class of his own. When we say that God is holy, what we mean is that he is separate from all other beings, in a sense that he is in a class of his own. There is no one like our God. He is holy. There is no one like him in his perfection, in his value, in his majesty, In his greatness, his power, his righteousness, his justice, his mercy, his grace, his love, his patience, there is no one like him. He is in a class by himself. He is holy. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Let's quote from Isaiah chapter 6 and verses 1 and through 3. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting up on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. And above him stood the seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And here we see a connection between these two words, holy and glory. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. But the whole earth is filled with his glory. In that line, we might have expected him to say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his holiness. But that's not what it says. It doesn't say that the earth is filled with his holiness. It says it's filled with his glory. And there we start to see our contrast. The holiness is something that he is. He is separate. He is unique. He is alone in his perfection. And glory, though, is something that can then fill the earth. It is a thing that points to his holiness. His glory shows that he is in a class by himself. Holiness is his quality. Glory are the things that point and show that quality. To take a look at this a little bit deeper, let's look at some of the Hebrew usage of this word, which is kavod or kabod. This is the Hebrew word translated glory in the Old Testament. In Exodus chapter 24, it says, Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day he called Moses out of the midst of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain, in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. The glory of the Lord in this context was like a cloud that covered the mountain. The people experienced it as a devouring fire. It was something that was tangible, but it was communicating to the people about the Lord's presence. It was proclaiming information about who he was. In other versions of this text, it was described as a terrifying fire. This glory was something that could be felt and it could be experienced. In Exodus chapter 40, in the wilderness, the glory of the Lord was an impressive cloud that would fill the tabernacle, and by night it was a fire. Verse 34, And the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. The glory of the Lord was something that could fill a temple. But there's another facet that's interesting as we look at this word of Hebrew, this kavod or kabod, that helps us kind of see what we're getting at here. There's another word that shares the same root. It's a word called kaved, and it's used to describe this idea of heaviness or weightiness. For example, in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 17, He who brought the news answered and said, Israel had fled before the Philistines, and there has also been a great defeat among the people. Your 2 sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark has been captured. And as soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backwards from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and kaved. He was heavy. Same kind of idea. It has this weight to it. Most people, if you fell off of your rock, wouldn't die. But he did because he was old and he was heavy. He had weight to him. Similar usage. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And when he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. They grew kaved, heavy. It's this idea of weight. It's locked in here. And this is the same kind of root, this word kavod or glory. In Numbers chapter 11, verse 14, I'm not able to carry this people alone because the burden is too heavy for me. So this idea of glory, it's something that can be felt and experienced like a cloud or a devouring fire, but it also has a certain weight or heaviness to it. To illustrate, let's go to the Alabama football trophy room. And I'm not a Alabama fanboy, but I will just tell you they are the greatest football team in the history. And I have no reason to say that. I was never from Alabama. I just looked at it objectively. Look, these guys are clearly the best. And if you go there, imagine you could put yourself there. And you're walking around their trophy room. And you start to see the walls of just championship after championship after championship. And you saw their walls of the Heisman Trophy winners that they had produced. And on their walls, you saw the professional football players that they had produced from their program. These are all things that speak to their greatness. But imagine you're there. You walk around there. Can you feel it? You touch those things. You get to hold the trophy. You see the pictures on the wall. These are things that tell about their greatness, and they also have a heaviness, a weight that you can feel. Those things are their glory. Okay, you don't like football. Let's go to Arlington Cemetery, the nation's cemetery for our soldiers. 400,000 of the nation's soldiers are buried here. And let's say we go there, and you can see rows and rows and rows of the tombstones representing the people who felt that this country was worth giving their lives for. And so you go and you see, just again, row after row, and you see the flag, and you see what it represents. And then you stop and you stand in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier. And you see what that represents. And you see the soldier standing there guarding it and protecting it. Can you feel it? These are things that are telling a story. And it has a certain weight to it. That's to its glory. In Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs his course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them. There is nothing hidden from its heat. The heavens, though silent, are shouting a story about who God is and what he is about. So simply put, the glory of God is what shows his holiness. It shows his perfect attributes. Can you see it? Can you feel it? Look at the creation that shows us who God is and how strong he is and how wonderful and how powerful and how majestic our God is to have created these things. These are to tell us about God, who he is, and what is he about. God made all these things. When properly understood, these things tell the story of his holiness. There is no God like Jehovah. What is it then to glorify God? The glory of God are those things which tell the story of his perfect attributes. To glorify God, then, is to participate in and contribute to telling of that story. John chapter 16 and verse 14, Jesus tells his disciples how this works. He will glorify me, for he will take what is mine and declare it to you. Speaking of God the Father, he was going to take the things of Jesus and show them to the world. And in that sense, he would glorify him. Specifically, he is talking about upcoming death, burial, and resurrection. These are defining events that show his character, that show his power, they show his sacrifice, they show his lordship to the entire world. That is his glorification. It is his glory. And God glorifies the Son by taking that and showing it to everyone. To glorify God, then, generally, it's then to take the things of God and declare them to the world, and this is our purpose. The psalmist gives us a great example in the rest of Psalm 19, or much of the rest of it. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. Do you see how he's taking the things of God and he's proclaiming them, and how great he is? The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. Fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the drippings of a honeycomb. After the psalmist sees how the earth and the heavens are declaring God's glory, he jumps in and starts declaring God's glory himself. He takes the things of God, he declares them to the world. This is our purpose. And God is serious about his glory. But let's not stop at the idea that it's just words. To show this point, let's revisit a familiar story about Nadab and Abihu. In Leviticus chapter 10, starting in 1, it says, "Now Nadab and Abihu, for those who aren't familiar, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And the fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. And Moses said to Aaron, 'This is what the Lord has said. Among those who are near me, I will be sanctified. And before all the people, I will be glorified.' And Aaron held his peace." Sometimes we like to key in on phrases and hear like unauthorized fire, which he had not commanded. But let's look deeper than that. Those were just a symptom of a greater problem. Sanctified here is the same idea as holy. He says, "Among those who are near me, I will be sanctified. I will be holy. I will be set apart in a class of my own. And before all the people, I will be glorified." The way that we act and treat him shows what we think about him. It tells a story about God's holiness. And it must all glorify him. Before all the people, I will be glorified. He goes on in verses 8 through 10. He says, "And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, 'Drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go to the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to distinguish between holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean. You are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Lord had spoken them by Moses.' Nadab and Abihu ultimately failed to distinguish between holy and unholy, between common and uncommon. When they came to the meeting intoxicated, what does that say about their God? A God that you could treat like that. When they failed to distinguish between holy and common, clean and unclean, what did they say about their holy God? He doesn't seem so holy when you can treat him like that. It was more than just an act of using the wrong fire. It's really what it meant. It's what it says about their God. They failed to glorify God. They missed their entire purpose. And at this point, I start to feel pretty good because I've never used unauthorized fire. But before I get too excited, I need to remember the words of Jesus when he rebuked some quite careful law keepers. In Matthew chapter 23, starting in verse 23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. Those you ought to have done without neglecting the others, you blind guides, straightening out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside may also be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also appear outwardly righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." Jesus acknowledges that they had followed certain parts of the law very precisely. They were very serious. But they neglected the weightier matters of the law. And in doing so, they had missed it all. This interaction should catch our attention. Jesus himself is literally calling some parts of the law weightier than others. But I thought they were all important. Well, that is true. We're not saying that this is not important. But to Jesus, he literally said that some are weightier than others. Let's think about this a little bit more. Do you see a difference here in these two columns? I mean, you may not even be able to read that column. You say, "I don't see a difference. It all looks like tiny font." I'll read it to you. On the left side, we have a type of law, things like loving your neighbor as yourself, honor your father and your mother, do not steal, do not murder, helping the poor. Let's put that in one category. On the other side, there's laws like give 10%. No work is to be done on the Sabbath. Don't eat anything that is unclean. Can you see a difference here in these types of things? Some people have described these, and they just would put them in categories and put words on it to describe it, just to help define them. They've divided them into categories. Some would call it positive, and some would call it moral. But to explain what we're talking about here, when we look at these things like give 10%, no working on the Sabbath, don't eat anything that's unclean, these things that people might describe as positive laws, these are in some sense arbitrary. To be clear, when I say arbitrary, it's not to suggest that there was never any rationale for why these things were chosen or why God chose what he chose in making the law. It's not what I'm saying. It's not random or by chance. But I'm merely saying that they could have chosen otherwise. There could have been a different percentage. There could have been a different day of the week. There could have been other things that were chosen to be holy. These things were in some sense arbitrary. Different day could have been holy. A different type of animal could have been clean or unclean, right? They're also temporary, meaning that they're tied to a specific time. They're not eternal. They have not always been true, and they do not continue to be true for all points in time throughout history. The moral laws are not that way. There is no world in which infidelity is preferable to faithfulness. There is no world in which murder is preferable to peace, or dishonest gain is preferable to honest, or neglecting those in need is preferable to helping those in need. It's not arbitrary. It's not tied to a specific time period. It doesn't go away. And the reason these things could never be different is that moral laws are grounded in the nature of God. It is who God is. And in that sense, these laws are natural and could not be any other way. Because God does not change, laws that are based in his nature will never change. Which of these seems more important to you? Obedience to commands that are temporary, that in other points in time do not even exist, and at some point in the future will cease to exist? Or obedience to eternal laws that have always and always will exist because they are grounded in who God is? And again, someone's tempted to interject, but they're all important, just like my children. Which is true. And I'm not disputing that. But listen to the words of Jesus. But listen to the words of Jesus when he says some matters of the law are simply weightier than others. And if we are tempted to believe that what makes us distinct as Christians is that we excel in keeping positive commands, like that's our key feature. We can keep these positive commands perfectly, and that makes us distinct. Then we have majored in the minors, and we have minored in the majors. This has never been the defining feature of Christians. The Christian walk is aimed at shaping our hearts and our minds. And if we cannot distinguish the weightier matters of the law, it makes me wonder if we are really seeing the weight of God's glory. In 1 John 2, verses 3 through 6, and by this we will know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. Whoever says, I know him, but does not keep his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, in him truly the love of God is perfected. By this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. I've heard a lot of Christians lean on this verse throughout my life. And we look at the point. Look, we're supposed to keep his commandments. And what we're thinking about is that we need to pay most attention to how we sing and how we give and how we assemble. And those things are important. But it misses everything to overlook the end of this, that we ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. And to be clear, brothers, to be clear, the legacy of Jesus that we see portrayed in the New Testament does not emphasize his perfect attendance, his a cappella singing in the church treasury. And if that's all that we see when we hear to keep his commandments, then we have missed the weightier matters of the law. And we have missed the glory of God. In John 15, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 1, beginning, if I speak in tongues of men and angels but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endureth all things. And in John chapter 13, we see the defining characteristics of Christians in the Bible. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. The way that we live, the way that we act, the way that we love each other, it is taking the things of God and it is declaring them to the world. It is what glorifies Him. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. As we close, I would ask you, how serious are you about a cappella singing? Most people here are probably very serious about it. I'm serious about it. How opposed would you be to someone bringing in an instrument in here? You walk in one day and there's a piano. Very serious about that. Not excited about this piano. We're not going to accept that. Do you feel at least that strongly about yourself whenever you miss the weightier matters? When you lose your temper? When you act selfishly? When you're prideful? When you're greedy? When you're unkind? When you're unloving? Don't miss your purpose in life. We were created to glorify God. The way that we speak and act and treat each other tells a story about the God we serve. They are like trophies on his wall, telling a story about his greatness. A life that doesn't declare the holiness of God we serve is like that watch that won't tell time, or like a dog that won't hunt. That's a bad watch. That's a bad dog. That's a bad life. It's not the Christian life. Because we are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. And we live to glorify God. If we can help you with that this morning, or if you need to start your walk as a Christian by glorifying the Lord Jesus Christ, by putting him on in baptism, don't waste another time living a bad life. We can help you. Please come as we stand and sing the invitation song.